said he was stuck in traffic on the 405. I was sitting in our driveway watching his car pull in from the opposite direction. Not from the freeway, from Westwood. I didn't say anything. I just watched him park, watched him check his phone before he even opened the door, watched him put on the face he always put on before walking into the house. That easy, tired smile that I had believed for 3 years meant he was happy to be home. I had been sitting there for 40 minutes. Not because I suspected anything. Not yet. I had just come back from picking up dinner and my key fob stopped working at the garage door, so I waited in the car and listened to the radio and didn't think about anything in particular. And then his headlights came around the wrong corner. My name is Audra. I'm 31 years old. I work in contract compliance for a mid-size healthcare company in Los Angeles, which means I read fine print for a living. I notice when numbers don't add up. I notice when language is vague where it should be specific. I notice gaps. I had been married to my husband for 3 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday in Silver Lake, back when I still thought Silver Lake was interesting. He was funny. He was easy to be around. He worked in commercial real estate, which sounded impressive until I understood what it actually meant. A lot of lunches, a lot of schmoozing, a lot of waiting for deals to close. He was good at the social parts, the parts that required patience, less so. We got married in 2022. Small ceremony, 20 people. His parents flew in from Phoenix. My mom cried. I thought I was doing the right thing. For the first 2 years, I think I was. I don't know exactly when things shifted. That's the part nobody tells you. It doesn't happen the way it does in movies, where there's a scene, a moment, a door slamming. It happens in the margins. A slightly shorter text reply. A reason to stay late that you don't fully register. The way someone stops asking about your day not because they're tired but because they've already started mentally leaving. I noticed, but I told myself I was overthinking. I am good at talking myself out of my own instincts. I've had to unlearn that. The headlights that night were the first thing I couldn't explain away. I didn't confront him. I just watched him walk to the front door and I sat in the car for another 2 minutes before I followed him in. He was already in the kitchen opening the takeout bag I'd left on the counter, acting like everything was ordinary. Traffic was brutal, he said, without looking up. Yeah, I said. Looked like it. I want to be careful here about what happened next, because I think people assume that women in this situation become detectives overnight, that there's some obsessive spiral. For me, it wasn't like that. I didn't go through his phone. I didn't hire anyone. I just started paying attention in a way I hadn't let myself before, and what I found wasn't hidden. It was just unexamined. The first thing was the credit card. We kept separate accounts. His idea, actually, when we first moved in together. He said it was cleaner. I had agreed because I didn't want to seem like I was tracking him. So I had never looked closely at his statements. But after the night with the headlights, I asked him, casually, if we could sit down and go over our joint savings account because I was thinking about refinancing options. He said sure. And when we sat down together, I saw a $340 charge from a hotel in Century City from 3 weeks prior. He had told me he was at a conference in San Diego that week. I didn't say anything. I looked at the number. I looked at the date. I looked at the name of the hotel, and I filed it away. Looks good to me, I said. I'll talk to someone at the credit union. He closed the laptop and went to watch TV. Here's what I understand now that I didn't understand then. I wasn't in denial. I knew. I had known, in some quiet part of myself, for longer than I wanted to admit. What I was doing in those first few days wasn't avoiding the truth. I was making sure I had all of it before I did anything with it. I called my friend Danny, who is a paralegal in family law. I told her what I'd found, not as a friend asking for comfort, as someone asking for procedure. She told me the first thing to do was nothing visible. Don't change your behavior. Don't ask questions. Don't move any money. She said, do you have a separate account he doesn't know about? I did. A small one, at a different bank. Something I'd kept from before we got married, just because it felt important to keep something of my own. I had never thought of it as protection. But it was there, she said. Good. Now find out what you actually have. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I should have done earlier in the marriage. I looked at everything. Our joint account, the mortgage documents. His business accounts, which he had once mentioned offhandedly, were tied to an LLC he'd formed for tax purposes. I pulled every record I had access to and built a spreadsheet because that's what I do. I read documents and I find the places where the story doesn't hold. There were 3 things that didn't hold. The first was the hotel. He had told me the conference was company paid, but the charge was on a personal card, and the hotel confirmed when I called posing as someone from the accounting department following up on expenses that the reservation had been made for 2 guests. The second was a recurring transfer of $800 a month to an account I didn't recognize. It had been going on for 11 months. When I traced the routing number, it came back to a fintech account that required a name to open. I didn't have the name, but I knew what it meant. The third thing was a voicemail I found by accident. He had connected his phone to our home speaker once and never disconnected it. I wasn't going through his phone. I was asking the speaker to play music, and it read a notification aloud before I could stop it. Just a name and 4 words. A woman's name. And, "When can we talk?" I stood in the kitchen and I let the speaker play the music I'd asked for, and I finished making my coffee and I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the yard. I had everything I needed. I want to tell you something about that moment, because I've tried to explain it to people and I don't think I always do it well. I wasn't devastated the way I expected to be. I wasn't crumbling. What I felt was something more like the particular exhaustion of having been right about something you spent a long time hoping you were wrong about. Not a collapse, a settling, like the air going out of something that had been held up by pressure. I thought about our wedding. I thought about his parents flying in from Phoenix and my mom crying. I thought about the version of myself who sat across from him at that birthday party in Silver Lake and thought, this one is steady. This one is safe. I thought I was wrong about what safety looks like. And then I picked up my phone and called Danny back and said, I'm ready. Danny referred me to an attorney named Kathleen. I went to Kathleen's office in Pasadena on a Tuesday afternoon, and I told her everything I had found. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked 3 questions. Did we have children? Did I work? Was the house in both our names? No. Yes. Yes. She said, California is a community property state. Everything acquired during the marriage is presumed equally owned. That includes his business income. She paused. I'd like to refer you to a forensic accountant. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The forensic accountant's name was Robert, and he had the energy of a man who had seen every version of this particular story and found them all, without exception, slightly tedious. He looked at the LLC documents I had gathered and the transfer history and the business filings, and he said, very flatly, he's been moving money. Not all of it, not even most of it, but enough over enough months that the picture was clear he had been quietly redirecting income from his commissions into accounts that existed in the structure of his business in ways that would have been difficult for me to trace without knowing what to look for. Robert knew what to look for. The good news, he said, is that we can document all of it. I want to pause here because I know what some people are thinking. Some people are thinking, why didn't you just confront him? I've thought about this. I've talked about it with Danny and with my therapist and with my mom, who asked me the same question with a slightly different tone than everyone else. The answer is, because I had spent 3 years not trusting what I already knew. I wasn't going to do that again. I needed the record to exist before he had the chance to shape the narrative, before he could look at me with that easy, tired smile and say I can explain, and it doesn't mean anything, and we can work through this. All the phrases that were already waiting in the wings, that I could already hear in his voice before he ever said them. I needed to walk in with everything, so that when he said, I can explain, I could already have the explanation in writing. Kathleen filed the petition on a Thursday. I was at work. She texted me when it was submitted, and I looked at my phone under my desk, and then I looked back at my screen, and I kept working. I didn't tell him that night, or the next night. Kathleen had advised against confrontation before service was complete. She said it wasn't legally required to wait, but that it was strategically sound. I agreed because that was exactly the word I needed. Strategic. It turned the next week from something I had to survive into something I was executing. He was served on a Monday morning. He was at the office when it happened. I know because I was at my own office and he called me 4 times in 11 minutes. I watched the phone light up on my desk, and I let it go to voicemail each time because Kathleen had told me not to discuss anything over the phone. He came home that evening, and I was already there. I was sitting in the living room, not dramatically, not posed. I was just sitting there with a glass of water because I was thirsty and I had decided there was no reason to be anywhere else. He walked in and he looked at me, and I could see the moment he registered that I wasn't startled by his expression, that I wasn't confused, that I already knew everything his face was trying to tell me. "Audra," he said. "Sit down," I said. He sat. "I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and because it followed almost exactly the script I had already written for it in my head. He said I can explain. He said it's not what it looks like. He said I never meant for this to happen. He said we can fix this, and that was the one that finally, after everything, made me feel something close to tired anger because we was exactly the wrong word. There was no we left to fix anything. I said, the petition has been filed. Kathleen's number is in the email I sent you this morning. You should get a lawyer, he said. You already talked to a lawyer. I talked to a lawyer 3 weeks ago, I said. He went quiet for a long time. I don't know what he expected. I think he had a version of this conversation in his head, where I was the one who was shattered, where he was the one who had the information, who controlled the timing. I think he assumed he'd have the chance to manage this on his own timeline, to finish whatever he'd started and then find the right moment to come to me, to be the one who chose when it ended. What he hadn't considered was that I had already chosen. How long have you known? He asked. Long enough, I said. The divorce took 7 months. California has a mandatory 6-month waiting period from the date of service. That's just how the law works, regardless of how mutual or how clean the split might be. Ours was not particularly clean. The forensic accounting found roughly $43,000 in redirected commissions over the previous 14 months. Robert was precise about it. 14 months down to the specific transfers, the dates, the receiving accounts. He presented it in a document that was 51 pages long and read like a very boring novel about a man making very bad choices in very small increments. Kathleen used it. We settled out of court. I won't tell you the exact number because it isn't the number that matters. What matters is that I walked out of the mediator's office in Burbank on a Wednesday afternoon in October, knowing that I would be able to keep the condo we had bought together, that the mortgage was manageable on my salary alone, and that he would be making monthly payments to me for the next 3 years. I ate a sandwich on a bench outside, and I watched people walk by, and I thought, okay, just that, okay. In the months after, I went back to some of the conversations I'd had with myself in the year before, the times I'd noticed something off and talked myself out of it, the headlights coming from the wrong direction, the slight change in how he said hello when he came in, the way I'd asked once, gently, if everything was all right between us, and he'd said, of course, why wouldn't it be? And I had let it go because questioning the answer felt like being difficult. I had been trained, somewhere along the way, to trust his version of reality over my own. I don't know exactly when that happened. I don't know if it was something he did deliberately or something I allowed because it was easier than conflict. Probably both. These things usually are. What I know is that the moment I stopped asking his version for permission, everything became very clear very fast. The spreadsheet. The hotel charge. The voicemail from the speaker. Robert's 51 pages. Kathleen's email at 11:14 on a Thursday morning. The glass of water in the living room on a Monday evening. All of it was just me deciding to see what was already there. My mom asked me once, toward the end of the process, if I was angry. I thought about it genuinely, because she deserved a genuine answer. I said, I was. And then I wasn't. And then I was again for a while. And now mostly I'm just clear. She said she didn't know if that was healthy or concerning. I told her I thought it was just honest. I'm still in the condo. I repainted the bedroom a color I would have chosen if I hadn't been trying to find the version both of us liked. I sleep better than I have in 2 years. I run on Sunday mornings along the bluffs in Palos Verdes, and I listen to podcasts, and I think about whatever I want to think about without editing myself. There is a version of this story where I'm the sad one, where I'm defined by what he did, where this is a story about loss. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and as close and poust a bit. But the larger part, the part I come back to when I think about that Monday evening in the living room, sitting with a glass of water, watching the door, is that I made a decision. I had all the information. I knew what it meant. I chose what to do with it. He thought he was managing the timeline. He thought he was the one who would decide when things ended and how. He was wrong about that, and knowing he was wrong, not hoping, not suspecting, but knowing, was the only thing I needed to walk through the rest of it without falling apart. The difference between surviving something and moving through it with your head up isn't strength exactly. It isn't some quality you either have or don't, it's information, and the decision to stop pretending you don't already have it. I've thought a lot about the specific moment it all turned. Not the headlights, not the hotel charge, not even the voicemail. The actual turning point was quieter than any of those things. It was the moment I stopped asking myself if I was being paranoid and started asking myself what was actually true. That's the thing no one really talks about. We're taught, somewhere along the way, to soften our own instincts, to be reasonable, to give the benefit of the doubt. And there's nothing wrong with that, genuinely. Trust is part of how any relationship functions. But there's a version of giving the benefit of the doubt that is really just choosing comfort over clarity. I had been doing that version for a long time, and I think on some level I knew it. What changed wasn't that I became a different person. What changed was that I decided my own perception was worth taking seriously. From there, the rest followed in a very direct line. I looked at the records because I trusted what I'd seen. I called Danny because I trusted what the records showed. I hired Kathleen and Robert because I trusted that what they would find mattered, that I deserved to know the full shape of what had been happening in my own life. Every step was just the natural consequence of that one decision, to stop editing myself out of my own story. And what I found when I stopped editing was that the situation was actually very clear. He had been moving money for 14 months. He had been lying for at least that long, probably longer. He had built a version of our shared life that had a private exit door he thought only he knew about. None of that required me to be angry to understand. It just required me to look. I think about Audra from a year before all this, sitting in the driveway watching those headlights come around the wrong corner, and then talking herself out of what she'd just seen. I understand her. I don't judge her. She was doing what felt safe, but she was also doing something that had a cost, and the cost was her own clarity. Every time we override what we actually know in order to preserve what we want to be true, we pay something. It accumulates quietly, the way $800 a month accumulates over 14 months, small enough to miss until someone puts it in a spreadsheet and shows you the total. The other thing I've learned, and this one took longer, is that how something ends is not the full measure of what it cost you. I walked away with the condo and 3 years of payments in my own name on my own accounts. That's real, and I'm grateful for it. But what I actually walked away with that meant the most was simpler, the knowledge that when it mattered, I did not abandon my own judgment. Danny, Kathleen, Robert, they helped me, genuinely, but they could only help because I had already decided to help myself first. That's the part you can't outsource, the willingness to see clearly, even when it's inconvenient, to build the record, to walk into the room already knowing. I'm Robert Sinclair, 67 years old, and I'm one who reads contracts for a living and got lucky that the skills I use at work turned out to apply to my actual life. But I think the underlying thing, the decision to trust yourself, that's available to anyone. It doesn't require a particular job or a particular kind of intelligence. It just requires the willingness to stop pretending you don't already know what you know. That willingness is quiet, it doesn't announce itself. It just changes everything downstream,